Sit with Lexi V.
Serena, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Lexi?
Good. It's been a long time since our
Yeah,
LinkedIn creator days. I mean, has it
yes,
been long? I don't know. It's been what, about 2 years? It seems like it was a lifetime ago, but also
I think
yesterday at the
so.
same time.
Right, right. It was a transformative time to 2-ish years ago.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So before we get started into your lesson today, where are your people from? Where are you from?
Oh, that's an
Mm,
interesting, loaded question.
yeah.
I grew up partially in Taiwan
Okay.
and partially in Kansas. So I
Wait,
actually,
Kansas City, Kansas or Kansas, Missouri?
oh no, like neither, like very small town
Oh,
in Kansas.
okay.
Um, so I So I actually have two families.
Hmm.
I was born and raised in Taiwan until I was 13,
Okay.
and I moved to the U.S. with my dad is a professor. Well, he just retired, but he had a visiting scholar opportunity, and he could go anywhere in the U.S. And so he found an agency in Taiwan to help us find where to go, paperwork, visa, all the good stuff, rental, and 4 flights later. So mind you, I was born and raised in Taipei,
Yeah.
giant city, millions of people, public transit, all that. So 4 flights later, the last flight, I started to see cows on the way down,
Yep.
and
Hmm.
we thought we were going to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh,
Instead, we ended
okay.
up in Pittsburgh without an H, Kansas.
Okay.
So I told my dad, like, I don't know anything about the US. I had been, just as a tourist, I've been to Disney at this point, but I didn't think Pennsylvania had that many cows. So, um,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we ended up in a very tiny town in Kansas, 7,000 people.
Wow.
There was nobody that looked like us. And I didn't speak a word of English, which
Oh,
is
wow.
great. And there was only one public high school. They didn't have English as second language program. It was you are here or you're not. So, tremendous fun. The first 6 months when I had to learn everything on the fly and yeah, actually look up words and translate them and oh my goodness. Yeah, so that was the first 6 months, and then after a while, I decided to stay. So after a year, my
Okay.
parents were going home, and I decided that I wanted to stay in the U.S. By myself because ignorance is bliss. So I made the argument that because I wanted to go to grad school in the US at some point,
Okay.
very
Okay.
forward thinking 13, 14-year-old.
Okay.
And I said, I want to stay here so I can learn the language, the culture, assimilate, get to school easier.
Hmm.
And he said, absolutely not. You can't drive. You don't have a bank. You have no credit card. Like, how is this going to work?
Hmm.
And I said, well, we'll figure it out because I didn't know better. And so basically, I ended up staying with. I found an American family that he was happy with, and they were just like incredible people. I gained a host sister along the way who was my classmate in high school, and my host mom. I'm still in touch today. I'm very close to her. We hang out like 3 times a year. She moved to California after retirement. But yeah, basically, I then grew up with my American family until I went to college.
Hmm.
So both Taiwan and Kansas is where I would say where
Girl,
my people are from.
it sounds like the cows grew on you. It sounds like the
Yes, the
cows grew on
cows did. Yes. Well, the cows probably not, but I did have a lot of good steak that I couldn't get in Taiwan. So I'm gonna, yes, I would say that, Kansas, and then like Kansas City barbecue is incredible.
As a
So,
person who is from St. Louis, Missouri,
ooh,
you are
okay, okay.
speaking my heart, and I'll be the I will say it publicly. I did not know that vegans existed until I went to college because I
Right.
come from like cow is a vegetable. So to like meet
There you
people,
go. Yes.
I knew a few
Yeah.
vegetarians, and where I'm from,
Uh-huh.
they were weird. But then to go to college and meet
Yeah.
vegans, I was like, wait, you're doing this purposefully?
Yeah. What
I
do
thought
you
it was
mean?
wildest things.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I
Yes.
love it. I
So
love it. So there you go, folks. That is not the lesson that we're here to talk about today, but a sub
no.
lesson is that you can just find a family to just take you in
Yeah.
and live the life that you want to live at 13.
That's right. That's right. Yes. And Lexi, at that age, I did everything a little girl would do in
Mm.
America. So I was like, I know I'm probably too old for this, and I don't care, but I want to do it all. The
Hmm.
Easter egg hunt, the
Yep.
Christmas cookie making, the dressing up for Halloween, getting candy. I don't care that I'm 5'2" and a half. But
I'm
I'm,
doing
I'm
it.
gonna do it.
I'm doing
Yes.
it.
And
Serena lives her life. I love this.
yeah,
Serena
and
lives.
you know,
Yes.
and they had a blast, right? Like, you know, because my host mom she just loves being a mom, and
Mm.
yeah, and she's like, yes, let's do this. She felt like she had a 6-year-old again, and
Mm.
it was so much fun. So I yeah,
Love it.
love her to death, and I'm grateful to have both families.
I love it. I love it. So you are a multifaceted and layered individual. I would argue that I think every human is multifaceted and layered.
Yes. Hmm.
But what I find very interesting and unique about you is your willingness to be so public about that and not hide the layers. Because as you know, Serena, in the world that we live in the societies that we live in, many times we tell kids, don't hide the layers. And then when they get a certain age, it's like, well, you're doing too much. Hide the layers. And you have not only built a thriving career as a data queen genius, who works with companies and talks about data, does a lot of speaking engagements about data, the importance of data, the importance of privacy in data, and how AI works with that. But you've also really created and curated this brand about like, yay, data is important. And also, I am these things. And I love that
Right.
about you. I love that you are so militant in owning and sharing that you are also other things than the data world that you've already conquered. So, my first question to you, Miss Data Queen, is how did you actually get into data in the first place?
Ooh, I got my PhD in economics.
Okay, well, there's data.
And
Yeah,
so it's
that makes
yeah,
sense.
so there's a lot of math involved, very quantitative.
Hmm.
And out of school, I got into consulting, and it
Mm.
was a very data driven type of work. So I got
Hmm.
my hands on a lot of data. In graduate school, I was working with public data sets like the
Okay.
census data, the labor market data about
Hmm.
people in the U.S. or the world, and then I started working with data about people within companies,
Okay.
and one of the things that was fascinating to me in research days and also in consulting days is the pay differential. Like, what makes someone earn more than others? So, to me, of course, I was thinking about the gap between men and women
Right.
and the gap between different race, ethnic groups and age and what have you, where you went to school, all these things that explain a lot of the reasons why some people get paid more than others.
Hmm.
And I just found that fascinating, and that's a problem data can solve. Along with speed of promotion, how long does it take for someone to get promoted? And really, now we have a lot more data than before. But I realized through those research and work in consulting that there are a lot of reasons that people might get paid more than others, and people who might
Yes.
get promoted faster. And of course, if we can just turn that into some playbook, we'll all be better off, right? Like, yeah, there are certain things that matter more than others, and
Hmm.
and things like people say women don't ask, they don't negotiate. It's just totally not true. Um, yeah, so there's like a little bit of myth busting that I do with data that I have been doing for a long time.
Hmm.
That is really energizing to me. Like it's like the detective in me, maybe. Um, and I get to say, no, actually, it is not true, or "Oh, okay, yes, that hypothesis is true, and using science and data for that reason.
Well, I've been saying for years that this whole thing about women not asking or people of color not asking is just this
Oh,
beautiful passive aggressive
yes.
lie because the truth
Yeah.
is it is asked, y'all just say
Yes,
no. But that is a
that's right.
separate episode. But for the
Yes,
record,
I'll have to
we
come back.
ask.
Yes,
We
yes.
ask, okay?
That's right.
Y'all just say no.
Yes.
So a few years
Yeah.
ago, you also really started talking about mental health publicly. And I
Right.
think that as a leader in your space, in your day job, as a leader and empowerer and women really standing in their own in these corporate spaces, I think it was very impactful. A lot of people were shocked that the Serena was coming out publicly and saying, like, yo, um, life is not all bed and roses. And not only am I willing to
Yeah.
share more about who I am in this layered body and spirit, but also figure out really interesting and fun ways to, you know, if you will, make a baby with the day job and this mental
Yeah.
health awareness. So let's talk about that.
Yes.
What really inspired you to start going more public about your mental health?
Well, it was sort of an accident one day.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
gosh, it was sometime during COVID,
Hmm.
and I, trigger warning, lost someone in Taiwan
Hmm.
to suicide, depression, and it was during a time where I couldn't fly there for the funeral. I
Right.
remember those days,
Hmm.
and it was just awful. And I kept thinking, gosh, if I had just gone to visit,
Mm.
and I felt all this guilt, and it wasn't like I could have personally done something, but I feel like, well, maybe if I did, maybe if I just let
Mm.
someone know, maybe if I just said something, and and all that guilt just overwhelmed me, and sadness and grief, and I couldn't sleep. I was haunted by those thoughts for days, and I was up like 5, maybe even 6 days without sleep.
Mm.
Um, and eventually, I like started typing. It was meant for like a private note to myself. It was like, I'm not okay,
Right.
and this happened. Really sad. And geez, if you have someone in your life, just checking on them, especially the people who appear to be really strong, who seem
Yes.
to have it all together. And that was like my message. And it was really meant for me. It was like, I wish someone were checking on me because I appear strong, but I'm not okay. And
Hmm.
then accidentally, I like hit post, and that was a LinkedIn thing. And yeah, and then hundreds, maybe more, messages flooded in from LinkedIn and even at work. Friends who are like, "Are you okay? I'm so sorry to hear this, and do you want to take some time off? And can we help you?" And I was like, "Well, wow, I'm surprised, but I also appreciated people who shared their journey and said, I feel the same, and your message made me feel seen and heard and like I'm not alone." And
Hmm.
yeah, and so like that moment really stuck with me because I was like, within a few, I think I was holding on to it, and that caused the insomnia. So after I posted, it was funny, I actually fell asleep. So I was like, oh my God, finally I was able to
So you
nap,
had
and I
no
woke up
idea that
to
like, oh, this is really going
no.
somewhere. Yeah.
No, yeah. So I woke up and I was like, oh my God, what happened? I should delete this thing. It's so unprofessional. Oh my goodness. Right?
Yeah.
And then at that point, it was like, oh, maybe not. And it seems like some people have found a community
Mm.
in the comments and in the chat. Someone started a group chat at work, and And I thought, you know what? Maybe there's a space for this after all. Maybe there's a space for this conversation
Yeah.
and this version of me that is not all strong and always okay, and that needs support just like everybody else. So I think, yeah, from that moment, I started to think about how I can share my own stories um, to make other people feel seen and heard and safe by sharing too.
Right.
And
Right.
so that's kind of how I got started. And yeah, and just so happens I've actually been meditating since I was 8 years old. My dad taught me as a way to, I don't know, calm myself down, apparently. So I was like, hey, I actually have a skill that I can use. So occasionally, when I start a team meeting and everyone seems very stressed, I would say,
Mhm.
okay, I'm just going to guide everyone through a 30-second, 1 minute meditation right now. Are you okay with it? If you don't want to be involved, you can come back. And then that sort of became a thing that I would do as a leader and manager on a team. And so, yeah, slowly I started to see how everything is connected and it's all part of who I am. And it's okay to share this other part of me.
I strongly believe that the best leaders in the world are the ones that lead from authentic experience and the ones that do things like you are doing. I think that we really have to humanize work. We have to humanize
Yes.
capitalism as
Yeah.
much as we can
Yeah.
because capitalism was not created for humans, which is again a separate episode, but as much as we can because we have to live in it and work in it. How do we
Yep.
humanize that experience? And it sounds
Yeah.
like one of the reasons why people were so just really impacted by that post was one, the authenticity of it, but also two, you were just humanizing yourself. I think the
Yeah.
more that leaders humanize themselves in the world, the better. At least for
Yes.
me as a leader, I
Absolutely.
really try to humanize myself because I want to lead from a place of love and encouragement, and most importantly, empathy. Right. And
Yes.
this idea that we as leaders have to hold the world on our shoulders and not have a bad day, even though life
Right.
be lifing. Okay,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
is
And that's,
really outdated. So
yeah.
I want to thank you from leader to leader. Thank you because when people like you do those types of things, it opens the doors for so many other people to have a humanized experience in their professional world, and that's really important.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you for making the space for this.
of
And,
course.
and this is why manager burnout is on the rise and not
Whew.
getting any better.
Yes.
uh, and it's been so hard, talking about carrying all the weight and making sure everyone is okay without sharing that they are not okay.
Right.
It's just not a great recipe for health.
Right. So after you write this post and you wake up and you're like, oh, this did something, um, and you receive these hundreds of messages and you're reading them, what was the step that made you decide how do we put these things together? Because as you and I both know, usually mental health and employee well-being, it's considered like the fuzzy stuff at work,
Yep.
right? It's the nice to have, right? It's the
Right.
sprinkles on the cake. But in order to make money, we have the cake. How did you start weaving this together to say no, it's not just sprinkles, like it can be the cake and I have data to prove it? Yeah.
Yes, it can be the cake, and I have icing for it.
Yes, yes, the good kind,
Um,
the good kind.
the good
Yes.
kind, yeah, or frosting. Yes, the yummy kind, not the
Yeah.
kind that you scrape off.
No. Yeah.
I realized that my my days of not feeling okay was not just a singular experience. It
Mhm.
was widely shared, and I thought, what if we knew who needed help? What if we knew as an organization someone who needed help or a particular team that needed help and we're able to provide that support in time? Wouldn't
Mm.
that be wonderful?
Okay.
Because in many jobs that I've had, I've helped organizations measure something called organizational health.
Okay.
And for those of you who are less familiar with people analytics as a field, often there are metrics like how many people are there in an organization, How many managers do you have? What is the attrition rate? What is the engagement level? What is the span of control for a manager? How quickly are we filling open roles and things like that? So, it gives you a sense of how healthy an organization is. And I really had an aha moment at some point. I was like, but then those metrics don't touch whether or not employees are actually healthy,
Right.
right? It
Right.
is processes that, yes, definitely tells you a lot about the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't hire people, if you keep losing them, then yes, there's a problem with the organization. But if you think about it, if every single person is sick in your organization,
Mm-hmm.
physically or mentally, emotionally, what have you, it's not going to be very healthy, even though you can fill roles really quickly. Right? At some point, these burned out, exhausted, and ill employees will leave
Right.
because they can't work. They can't be productive. It just doesn't work. So I kept thinking about, you know what, we're missing the point around this concept that a lot of companies are after, which is we should have healthy organizations that, operate in a healthy way. But
Mm-hmm.
what about the individual health that we're not measuring, that we're not talking about? Where's the metric for that?
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing things around surveys, right, where we can start asking employees on a regular basis, how are you doing? Very simply, where do you feel like you need additional support? Does your manager care about you as a person? Those type of things that I would advocate for those questions to be added to a survey. And it's not just about, do I feel like I want to stay here, or my
Right.
career aspirations, and then so on. But other things that also deserve a spot in measurement and analytics. So then I started to, get those results back.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started doing things with those findings, like, hey, there are organizations that need support, and here's why. Because now I have data to tell you exactly what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
For example, this is something I found across many organizations, is that in large global organizations, if it's a US-based company, meaning headquartered in the US, a lot of times the employees in Asia, employees in Europe are having a hard time with work-life balance simply because of meeting schedules. That's it.
Yeah. Because
They
they're up
have to
all
stay
night
up late.
and then all
Yes,
day. Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, do I need hard data to tell you that? Perhaps not. But what if I'm able to tell you that, hey, if we're having meetings that's just a couple hours outside the time zone, regular working hours, that's not too bad. But when you go like 6 to 10 hours outside normal range for people, they start to feel really exhausted, okay? And they start to want to quit. What if I'm able to bring those insights? Those are actionable things, right, for the organization. Then they can say, well, then we can set up alerts for managers, or training and communication for managers to be mindful of this. Or maybe we do things like we'll rotate. You don't always have to stay up. And this is something I would do on my team, is that, hey, I know it's always 11 p.m. your time when we have this conversation. Let's make sure it's sometimes 11 p.m. my time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's inclusive, right? It's, again, simple things that show that you care. So it's bringing those data, gathering those data, start asking those questions on how can we do better to improve the health and well-being of all employees beyond those process metrics, and then bringing those insights to the leadership team so they can actually do something about it.
The reason why that's important, family, is because I do believe that not believe, I know we live in a competitive market, right? And so you have tons of companies that you could potentially work for, especially
Yes.
if you're really, really good at your job and you're very
Right.
good at networking, right?
Yes.
Serena, I don't know about you, but I have never left a company because I was happy
Right.
ever in life. I have left the company because I wanted to get more money.
Yeah.
But looking back on that move, I do believe that if I was happier at that company, I probably would have taken like that 30K
Yeah.
uptick. And
That's
that's
right.
coming from a place of privilege. But I think sometimes leaders and companies don't realize that if you treat people like people and you
Uh-huh.
have the data to support it, it's going to take a lot for them to leave. And for the record,
Yeah.
just like sexuality, this is definitely a spectrum. And there are people who are so happy at their company, but an
Yeah.
opportunity comes up that they cannot pass up
That's
financially.
right.
But those are
Yeah.
the outliers, right?
Right.
And so I
Right.
love what you're doing where you're taking, as they called it, the fuzzy stuff, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is very problematic. I think it's the important stuff. And you're
Yes.
saying, let's put data and science to back it so we can make improvements. And also so we can give out consequences when y'all start acting a fool.
That's right.
Hmm.
Exactly. We have to
Hmm.
hold people accountable.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So now that you started doing that, tell me more about that, how this has opened even more of your identities at work and in public since coming out publicly with just
Yeah.
like, hey, sometimes I'm not okay, to like, hey, how can this actually transform an organization and also become a job as well? How has this
Right.
journey been for you as a human?
It's been incredible. Like, one, I feel liberated, right?
Ooh.
I feel like I don't have to hide a part of me, and that
Mm.
it's helping people when I share those things. Um, Professionally, I've been able to speak at mental health events for for corporates and different conferences on a very important topic, and I'm able to bring a different perspective that other well-being practitioners may not be as familiar with, right? Because they don't always have someone like me pushing for data in their organization.
Hmm.
And then also writing a book. Like, my book is at the intersection of data, AI, and well-being, and it's yeah, it's just something I never thought I would do. Like, I feel this will sound strange to say out loud, but I'll say it anyways. But I feel like a proper thought leader
Mm.
in the space finally. Whatever. There was a lot of imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
um, and yeah, and it seems like I found not only my voice but also an audience that benefits from me having a voice in that space that is at the intersection of seemingly unrelated things.
So, what do you think, little Serena, if little Serena had mastered this lesson when she was younger, the lesson in the concept of you are allowed to be all of your layers? God forbid, if you are all of your layers, you will be liberated faster.
Oh,
If she
yeah.
learned that lesson earlier, what do you think would have been different in your journey?
Hmm. I really think my mental and emotional and even physical health would have been better
Mm.
because on this journey, I've started to research a lot of how our brain is connected to our body, and
Right.
that when you don't express your emotions, it gets stored in your body, and
Yeah.
then it comes out when you probably don't want it to,
Mhm.
and that can get ugly, right? And I think there's just so much of me that I had not necessarily suppressed consciously, but just put aside. And it's like, oh, it's in this other box. And
Mhm.
today I'm going to only be in the data box.
Mhm.
And at some point, I will play music, but that's in another box. I will
Mhm.
paint, but that's another box. And I will do meditation, but that's another box. I also know yoga, another box. And so I just feel like there are all these tiny little boxes on the side that I could not bring with me. And um, yeah, and it wasn't that someone, occasionally people do express their opinions that I didn't ask for on LinkedIn by saying that I should stay in my box. But most of the time, it wasn't like on a daily basis someone tells me I need to be in a particular box. It just was easier, and it was all I knew. And I didn't know how the other part of me could help people, which is
Right.
so impactful and
Mhm.
meaningful and makes me feel fulfilled. And yeah, and I think I would have started those sharing a little bit sooner.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think, pursuing something in maybe even the healthcare space, right? And I was actually at some point if we didn't run out of funding, I was going to do a postdoc in health policy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yes, so right, this is not a person who's tired of school, apparently. And I was like, I wanted to make a difference in the space using data, but in something different, because like health is really important to, well, to everyone. But I also feel like it's just something I wanted to explore more, and I think I would have done that sooner, as opposed to now kind of getting back to it in interesting ways, right? Like now I have healthcare clients, and
Right.
and that's been really cool by teaching them how to use AI to make patient care better, how to use AI to make their process more efficient, and how to plan for the future by upskilling their nurses. And I love all of that work, but I feel like I missed a whole decade by not knowing this.
Last question for you. Reintroduce yourself and all of your boxes to us. Who are you?
Oh, oh my gosh, this is a tough one. Um, I'm gonna say I am oh, a well-being obsessed
Mm,
AI thought leader
okay.
who enjoys music and art. I
I
think I
love
got all the
that.
boxes. I think I got all the
That's,
boxes.
that's almost, well, you forgot the one about like
Wait.
you having two families, but I'm gonna let
Oh
that go.
man.
I'm gonna let it
Okay.
go. Okay?
Okay.
I'm gonna let
Shoot.
you slide today.
Okay. Okay. Well, we're gonna add bicultural somewhere up
Yes, I
front.
love
How's
that.
that?
Bicultural.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, thank you so much for being here. And thank you just for being so honest, not only here, but just in public. It's something that I really admire about you. You continue to remind me, encourage me, challenge me to be more public
Oh.
about layers of me that
Oh
I'm
my
usually
goodness.
pretty private
Yeah.
about. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you. You know
Yeah.
what? It's the easier thing to do. It's
Yeah.
the easier thing to do because there's only one of you, and you gotta be you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. If one of the most impactful soul searching coaching activities I've done was figure out my values. Lexi, I
Mm.
don't know if you've done that before.
Well, I have. It
Okay.
will definitely
Ooh.
transform how you live life once you figure them
Yes.
out. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my advice is like to people to try to do it at least once a year because our
Hmm.
values do sometimes change because of what happens in life. And then put them on sticky notes, like right
Hmm.
next to your laptop or what have you. And every day when you are making a decision, ask yourself, is that aligned with your top values? And if not,
Don't do it.
try again. Try again. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yes, and for me, honesty, transparency are towards the top. So I remind myself all the time, even when it's uncomfortable.
Well, there you have it, folks, from the Data Queen herself. Um,
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much for having me.